Laba bwekulya okulungi bwekusanyusa abooluganda okutula. Laba bwekulya okulungi bwekusanyusa abooluganda okutula. Ine matovu umanaimu shebeti achim gam yahadu. Ine matovu umanaimu shebeti achim gam yahadu. Laba wekulya okulungi bwekusanyusa abooluganda okutula. Laba wekulya okulungi bwekusanyusa abooluganda okutula. Ine matovu umanaimu shebeti achim gam yahadu. Ine matovu umanaimu shebeti achim gam yahadu.
Hashem lo yivne bayis, shalom lo yivoyna boy. Hashem lo yishmari, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne bayis, shalom lo yivoyna boy. Hashem lo yishmari, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne bayis, shalom lo yivoyna boy. Hashem lo yishmari, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne bayis, shalom lo boyna boy. Hashem lo yishmari, shav shokat shoymai. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Hashem lo yivne bayis, shalom lo boyna boy. Hashem lo yishmari, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne bayis, shalom lo boyna boy. Hashem lo yishmari, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne bayis, shalom lo boyna boy. Hashem lo yishmari, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne bayis, shalom lo boyna boy. Hashem lo yishmari, shav shokat shoymai. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Na 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 na.
Kalam, Ene Shabati Nakavera, Lehanodi Kirati Kalam, Ene Shabati Nakavera, Shamuru Vezakoru Medivori Ehadi, Ishimianu Elihami Ohadi, Adonai Ehadi, Bushimo Ehadi, Ishemi Buri Kipareti Buri Tuhidam, Lehanodi Kirati Kalam, Ene Shabati Nakavera, Lehanodi Kirati Kalam, Ene Shabati Nakavera, Ikirati Shabati Lehumuni Leha, Iji Mehori Haboraha, Mirashi Sofa maase bemeha sofa tuhila Lehadodi kiratikara Ene shabati nakavela Lehadodi kiratikara Ene shabati nakavela Mikuna shimereha irumeruha Umize imitoha ha feha Rabura ha shebeti ba elendi habaha Bebuya hamolu aleiha emilam Ehadodi ikiratikala Ene shabati nakavela Ehadodi ikiratikala Ene shabati nakavela Itinari mina faru komi Livishi bihide iti faru te haami Aluyadi beni shaideti harahami Kaluba eri nafushigala Ehadodi likiratikala Ene shabati nakavela Ehadodi likiratikala Ene shabati nakavela Iti urari Iba ureha uri shiru daberi Kabodi Adonai alaiha nigala Ehadodi likiratikala Ene shabati nakavela Lehadodi likiratikala Ene shabati nakavela
Si en dracmas el día tomo, ya te puedo mantener. De tu madre no la como, ay, damana, mana, que te quiero detener. De tu madre no la como, ay, damana, mana, que te quiero detener. Fugiremos de la pena, porque yo ya sé ganará. Vamos a la Palestina, ay, damana, mana, para no más rovinar. Vamos a la Palestina, ay, damana, mana, para no más rovinar. Va corriendo mamá, hazle la proposición. Quiere solo una cama, ay, damana, mana, que es la consideración.
biyefazuko azaimeha shimonikila vehaharei kihalati hakol levado imalu hamra vehuhaya vehuhove vehuhihie bitifara vehuehad veinashani vehamashilo lohahibla dirirashi diritahamsi velohozi vehamasila vehueli vehaigoali vesuri hevri diesizora vehunisi umanasi minasikosi veyomu evra veyada.
Here I am again, without much to offer by way of moral worth. I have a rich collection of defeats. Maybe that's to your liking. I don't know. Do you? If I'm to be quite frank, your likes and dislikes have never been all that clear to me. Presumably, love is something you're in favor of, and I've found it possible to love, but never without a certain anguish. Whether that's the way you intended it or that's a problem all my own, I can't say. Can you? I've never wanted to pain others. I've never wanted to pain myself. I guess I can plead good intentions, but I needn't tell you about good intentions and the road to hell. I've often wondered, did you yourself intend that to live would be so complicated, to find a way in the world so hazardous? Did you have any idea at all that living would involve such confusion and such heartbreak? I can't be sure any of this will mean much to you. I can't even be sure that you exist as more than a figment of my own mysterious psyche. It's a risk to open up to you. Who knows, I may be branding myself a terrible fool. But what's not a risk? What's guaranteed to be foolproof? So here I am again, praying for some modest bravery so that I can go on saying to you, here I am again.
Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, oje halelucha sela. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, oje halelucha sela. Ashrei, ashrei yoshvei beitecha. Happy are those who dwell in your house. They will sing your praises forever. Happy are those who dwell in your house. They will sing your praises forever. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, oje halelucha sela. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, oje halelucha sela. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha.
Soul, bless your name, eternal God, and let every human being acclaim your majesty forever and ever. Through all eternity, you alone are our sovereign God. God of all ages, of all creatures, of all generations, all praise to you. You guide the world with steadfast love, your creatures with tender mercy. You neither slumber nor sleep. You awaken the sleeping and arouse the dormant. You give speech to the silent, freedom to the enslaved, and justice to the oppressed. To you alone we give thanks. Though our mouths shall overflow with song as a sea, our tongues with melody as the roaring waves, our lips with praise as the heaven's wide expanse. And though our eyes were to shine as the sun and the moon, our arms extend like eagle's wings, our feet speed swiftly as deer, still we could not fully thank you, our God and God of all ages, or bless your name enough for even one of your infinite kindnesses to our ancestors and to us. Therefore, O God, limbs and tongue and heart and mind shall join to praise your name. Every tongue will yet affirm you, and every soul give you allegiance. As it is written, all my limbs shall say, who is like you, Eternal One? And David saying, bless the Eternal One, O my soul, and let all that is within me bless God's holy name.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Maker of darkness and dawn, the God who opens the gates of mercy, who gives light to all who await forgiveness, be with us on this atonement day. God of times and seasons, be with us this. God of hope and joy, be with us this day. Be with us as we look for strength to be free, freedom to struggle against those who worship power, and power to resist all who would oppress us. God of freedom and right, be with us this day.
O one and only God, you have made each of us unique and formed us to be united in one family of life. Be with us, Eternal One, as we seek to unite our lives with your power and your love. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha. Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha. V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam. B'shiftecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha. Ukshartam liot al yedecha. V'hayu letotafot bein einecha. Uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. Lema'an tiskeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai. V'item kedoshim lelohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, lihiot lachem lelohim, ani Adonai Elohechem. In this world waiting to be redeemed, our hearts cry out. Cannot our dearest hopes at last come true? Many are our defeats, yet how many are deliverances? After servitude to Pharaoh, we choose service to God. After exile in Babylon, we rebuild God's shrine. Yesterday's wounds, so nearly fatal, begin to heal, and Israel, living still, plants new seeds of redemption.
Will yet be at peace, the earth will yield good fruit, mountains and waters will exult, those who sowed in tears will reap in joy, and all will sing with one accord.
לשמחה שפת הים יחד כולם הולדו והמליכו ואמרו וזוכר חסדי אבות Baruch atah Adonai. Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בגבורות, ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, מי כמוך אב רחמים, זוכר יצוריו, לחיים ברחמים, לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחייך הכל.
Page 8. Your might, O God, is everlasting. You are the source of life and blessing. You are the support of the falling. You are the author of freedom. You are our hope in death as in life. Your might, O God, is everlasting.
Let us proclaim the sacred power of this day. It is awesome and full of dread. For on this day your dominion is exalted, your throne established in steadfast love. There in truth you reign. In truth you are judge and arbiter, counsel and witness. You write and you seal, you record an account. You remember deeds long forgotten. You open the book of our days, and what is written there proclaims itself, for it bears the signature of every human being.
The great shofar sounded,
The still small voice is heard. The angels heard by fear and trembling declare, "This is the day of atonement. As all who dwell on earth stand arrayed before."
As the shepherd seeks out the flock and makes the sheep pass under the staff, so do you muster and number and consider every soul, setting the bounds of every creature's life and decreeing its destiny.
Shana,
Kamai Barehu. Rosh Hashanah, Ikateru, Uyam Tzom Kippur, Uyam Tzom Kippur, Yegatenu. Rosh Hashanah, Ikateru, Uyam Tzom Kippur, Uyam Tzom Kippur, Yegatenu.
Please join me in the middle of page 9. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, on Yom Kippur it is sealed, how many shall pass on, how many shall come to be? Who shall live and who shall die? Who shall see ripe age and who shall not? Who shall perish by fire and who by water? Who by sword and who by beast? Who by hunger and who by thirst? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who shall be secure and who shall be driven? Who shall be tranquil and who shall be troubled? Who shall be poor and who shall be rich? Who shall be humbled and who exalted? But repentance, prayer, and tzedakah temper judgment's severe decree.
בכל הארץ. ברוך לבוא אדוני ממקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו. והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, לדור ודור. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
To all generations we will make known your greatness, and to all eternity proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O God, shall never depart from our lips. Blessed is the Eternal One who rules in holiness. You are with us in our prayer, in our love, in our doubt, in our longing to feel your presence and to do your will. You are the still, clear voice within us. Therefore, O God, when doubt troubles us, when anxiety makes us tremble and pain clouds the mind, we look inward for the answer to our prayers. There may we find you, and there find courage and endurance. And let our worship bring us closer to one another, that all Israel and all who seek you may find new strength for your service.
Sim shalom, Torah uvracha. Sim shalom, Torah uvracha. Sim shalom.
Peace and happiness, blessing, grace, love, and mercy. May these descend on all Israel and all the world. Bless us, O God, one and all, with the light of your presence. For in the light of your presence we find the fullness of life, faithful love and charity, compassion, blessing, and peace.
Help
Help us, O God of peace,
by our deeds to
inscribe ourselves in the book of life and blessing, righteousness, and peace. Praise be the one who teaches Israel and all peoples to love and pursue peace, and to bring it all to the earth.
Good morning. I'm so honored to speak with you today. My name is Nancy Rodering. I'm the mayor of Highland Park and a longtime member of HaKafah. 4 years ago, on Yom Kippur, my dear friend, the late Rabbi Peter Noble, spoke about our Jewish commitment to social justice, taking what we study in Torah and applying it to the problems facing the world. Rabbi Noble stated, "We bring Torah into the world when we strive to fulfill the highest ethical mandates in our relationships with others and with all God's creations. Partners with God in Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, we're obligated to pursue tzedek, justice, and righteousness, and to narrow the gap between the affluent and the poor, to act against discrimination and oppression, to pursue peace, to welcome the stranger, and to redeem those in physical, economic, and spiritual bondage. These acts bring us closer to fulfilling the call to translate the word of Torah into the works of our hands." These esteemed words lead me to talk with you today about the 4th of July parade mass shooting in my hometown, the city of which I'm the mayor, Highland Park. That day, we saw horrors and we saw heroes, and in the aftermath of this 1-minute act by one person with one weapon that shook our community to its core, we now work to fulfill the calling of Torah. It's 3 months and 1 day since the shooting. It feels like it's been forever. It still, frankly, doesn't seem all that real. We remember and we honor the 7 individuals who were taken too soon, and we keep all of those who were injured, so many still trying to recover from these devastating and complex wounds, and their families in our thoughts. As a community working to support one another through this crisis, we're so appreciative of the support we've received from near and far, including from so many of you who are with us today. On that day, not knowing if the shooting was even over, brave first responders immediately ran into what looked like a combat zone. And there were dozens of volunteers. Some were medical professionals, but most were just fellow human beings, fearless in their desire to stop the bleeding from massive and complex wounds. Without their courage, the outcome likely would have been worse. And in the weeks that have followed, thousands of stories have emerged, not just about the fear of hiding from an active shooter from hours with strangers in cramped locations, or the panic of missing children as people ran for cover, but of welcome, of comfort from strangers. And this support continues as strangers are now family, united forever by horror and compassion. In the days and weeks that followed the shooting, 1,200 people a day streamed into the makeshift Victims Response Center at Highland Park High School seeking trauma counseling. Hundreds of volunteer mental health professionals offered their services for free. Art therapists worked with those whose words escaped them. Strangers, this was unbelievable, but strangers came together constantly on street corners, hugging, crying, sharing their stories, and listening carefully to the stories of others. Connections were made as people invested their time and their energy in each other, performing acts of Tikkun Olam. Well, there's a 198-page handbook that is sent to mayors in the aftermath of a mass shooting. Think about that. There's no roadmap telling us what to do when something of this magnitude hits home. But the decisions we make, followed by the actions we take, illustrate who we are and what we can be. And if there is even one thing that we can do to save another life, to keep another community from this horrific pain, each of us must try. And we know that no community is immune to gun violence, and among American mayors, there's the common recognition of not if, but when a mass shooting will come to their city. But what's equally concerning, our children talk about not if, but when a mass shooting will come into their lives. Our children knew exactly what to do on the 4th of July because they have been training for an active shooter their entire lives. What does this say about us? Mass shootings are a uniquely American problem. In 2022 alone, over 600 mass shootings have occurred, and this year isn't over. We know from conversations with the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Victims of Crime, the impacts of this one person, this 1 minute, will last for years, decades, lifetimes. The agony is truly incomprehensible. Now, I just said mass shooting twice, and nobody in this room really flinched. What if I said mass human rights violation? We'd pay attention. So much of our being inured to gun violence is sadly the repetition of those words. We hear them so often, daily in Chicago, gun violence. Several organizations like the Brady Center are urging that we look at violence through a human rights violation lens. Isn't threatening one's right to live a very clear violation of their human rights? And human rights are at the very core of social justice. Back to the words of Rabbi Noble. We have an obligation to narrow the gap between the affluent and the poor, to act against discrimination and oppression, to pursue peace, to redeem those in physical, economic, and spiritual bondage. Sadly, in our nation, the uncontrolled threat of gun violence affects all, but disproportionately the poor. It creates oppression, it obliterates peace, and I would argue it creates and causes physical, economic, and spiritual bondage. This shooting literally hit home and was a reminder that impactful action against U.S. gun violence's epidemic is long overdue. You may recall that in 2013, in the wake of Sandy Hook, the Highland Park City Council and I passed an assault weapons and large capacity magazine ban. And we fought the NRA all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we prevailed. Our case set a precedent that makes it constitutional for Illinois cities to ban assault weapons and large capacity magazines. Unfortunately, our ordinance was passed during a short temporary opportunity under state law, and currently Illinois cities are prohibited from enacting other bans. And despite the fact that these laws are constitutional, the Illinois General Assembly hasn't yet seen the need to change the law, or better, to enact a statewide ban, making it that much harder for the next person bent on mass carnage to access a combat weapon. Highland Park's ordinance reflected our community's values, and we did what was feasible under existing law, but we aren't an island. I hope you'll agree that combat weapons have no place on our streets, and I ask that you join us as we continue to pursue local, state, and federal options. We have no time to waste. Our communities deserve better. Now, for 10 years, there was a federal assault weapons ban, and though it expired in 2004, during that time, according to Giffords experts, there was a 70% drop in mass shooting deaths. We need a federal assault weapons ban, but that will take time that we don't have. So again, I ask you to join me in reaching out to mayors and community leaders. Urge them to communicate their support for a return to statewide and federal assault weapons and large capacity magazines. This is every city's concern. This is every city's fear. This is every city's problem. Now, some may argue, wait, this is a political speech in the middle of a very solemn religious service. No, it's a call to protect human rights, which is about as Jewish as you can get. So this debate is not about whether we're burdening lawful gun owners with new regulations. These constitutional regulations existed before. This debate is about whether we're taking common sense steps to preserve our own public safety, our own human rights. Let's call gun violence what it is: terrorism, a threat to our human rights. So what can you do? Reach out to friends and family, especially those in conservative areas. Share our story and urge action. Tell them about the devastation that has landed on our doorsteps due to cavalier views of gun violence. Remind them that only the U.S. allows this horror to persist. Tell them about 8-year-old Cooper Roberts, who went to a 4th of July parade with his family and missed the beginning of the 3rd grade because he was still hospitalized and learning about living forevermore in a wheelchair with PTSD. Tell them about 2-year-old Aidan McCarthy, still asking for his mom and dad, who died shielding their only child during a family outing to celebrate freedom. His own mother, a Soviet Jewish emigre, her grieving parents' only child. Tell them about the Toledo family, all 17 of them, who directly experienced what happened to their grandfather's head when he was hit by high-velocity gunshot. When Emmett Till's mother opened his casket to show the world what racism had done to her child, she was one person who took action. When America saw Darnella Fraser's video recording of George Floyd's last breath, something changed in our country. We paid attention. This is that moment. In the aftermath of the 4th of July, I've heard from people across the political spectrum who agree these combat weapons don't belong in civilian hands. They recognize the very real threat these guns pose to our daily lives. The impact of this 1-minute event by this one person will last generations. I go back to something that Rabbi Noble said 4 years ago on this day. Freedom is hard won. Democracy must be reaffirmed at every moment. Forcing people to live in fear of gun violence is not a celebration of freedom. As we conclude these days of awe and reflect on how we can improve our lives and the lives of others in the new year, let us reaffirm our commitment to protecting our human rights, all of us. Thank you.
We continue on page 11 with the Vidui Confession. Our God, God of our mothers and fathers, grant that our prayers may reach you. Do not be deaf to our pleas, for we are not so arrogant and stiff-necked as to say before you, our God and God of all ages, we are perfect and have not sinned. Rather do we confess, we have gone astray, we have sinned, and we have transgressed.
Tafanu sheker, ay 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 Mara Rashanu,
Shichatnu,
Shikatnu,
Tiavnu,
Tiavnu,
Tainu,
Tainu,
Titanu,
Titanu, ay, 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 ay,
We all have committed offenses. Together we confess these human sins.
The sins of arrogance, bigotry, and cynicism, of deceit and egotism, flattery and greed, injustice and jealousy.
Some of us kept grudges, were lustful, malicious, or narrow-minded.
Others were obstinate or possessive, quarrelsome, rancorous, or selfish.
There was violence, weakness of will, xenophobia.
We yielded to temptation and showed zeal for bad causes.
Now may it be your will, O God of all generations, to pardon all our sins, to forgive all our wrongdoings, and to blot out all our transgressions.
Failures of truth. We sin against you when we sin against ourselves.
For our failures of truth, O God, we ask forgiveness.
For passing judgment without knowledge of the facts.
And for distorting facts to fit our theories.
For deceiving ourselves and others with half-truths.
And for pretending to emotions we do not feel.
For using the sins of others to excuse our own.
And for denying responsibility for our own misfortunes.
For condemning in our children the faults we tolerate in ourselves.
And for condemning in our parents the faults we tolerate in ourselves. Failures of justice. We sin against you when we sin against ourselves.
For failures of justice, O God, we ask forgiveness.
For keeping the poor in the chains of poverty.
And turning a deaf ear to the cry of the oppressed.
For using violence to maintain our power.
And for using violence to bring about change.
For waging aggressive war.
And for the sin of appeasing aggressors.
For obeying criminal orders.
And for the sin of silence and indifference.
For poisoning the air and polluting land and sea.
And for all the evil means we employ to. Failures of love. We sin against you when we sin against ourselves.
Failures of justice, O God, we ask forgiveness.
For confusing love with lust.
And for pursuing fleeting pleasure at the cost of lasting hurt.
For using others as a means to gratify our desires.
And as stepping stones to further our ambitions.
For withholding love to control those we claim to love.
And shunning aside those whose youth and age disturbs us.
For hiding from others behind an armor of mistrust.
And for the cynicism which leads us to mistrust the reality of unselfish love.
Teach us to forgive ourselves for all these sins, O forgiving God, and help us to overcome them.
For all these, O God of mercy, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. As in your love you have been patient with this people from the time you led us out of Egypt to the present day, so in your great love may you forgive your people now.
שומע תפילות בתחנונים, אתה שמע קולנו, אדוני אלוהינו, חוס ורחם עלינו. שמע קולנו, אדוני אלוהינו, חוס ורחם עלינו. יאי לה 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 לה, יאי לה 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 לה, יאי לה 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 לה, יאי לה 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 יאי לה 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 לה, יאי לה 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 לה, יאי לה 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 לה, יאי לה 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 לה, יאי לה לה לה, יאי לה 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 לה. Hear our voice, Adonai our God. Have compassion upon us, and with that compassion, willingly accept our prayer. Cause us, Adonai, to return to you, and then we will return. Renew our days of old.
We rise.
Avinu Malkeinu Shema Kolenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu Chamol Aleinu Ve'al Olalenu V'tapenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion upon us and upon our children and infants.
Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Dever V'cherev V'ra'av Me'alenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, remove pestilence, sword, famine, and captivity.
Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Kol Tsar Umastin Me'alenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, rid us of every oppressor and adversary. Avinu Malkeinu, kodvenu b'sefer chaim tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of good life.
Avinu Malkeinu, chadesh aleinu shana tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a good year.
Avinu Malkeinu, harem keren Yisrael amecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, raise up the might of Israel, your people.
Avinu Malkeinu, cholnenu va'anenu, ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu.
Avinu Malkeinu, favor us and answer us, for we have no accomplishments. Deal with us charitably and kindly and deliver us.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, Ve'halol Aleinu, V'tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu,
got the I feel so short. Faith, come on over. Come on over. Lori, come on over too. I gotta find it. Hold on a second. I forgot to roll it. Talk amongst yourselves for a moment. You start with one key. I got it. All right, it is traditional on Yom Kippur morning to read from towards the end of the Torah, the portion Nitzavim, which is God's challenge through Moses to all of us to stand together to accept the words of the covenant. You can find the Torah portion in your prayer book beginning on page 15. We're actually going to start on page 16 as one of our chanters is home recovering from COVID. So, Allison, keep healing. The blessing beforehand can be found on page 15.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorah. Baruch Adonai Hamvorah leolam va'ed. Baruch Adonai Hamvorah leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahu banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Ra'ei natati lefanecha hayom et ha'chayim ve'et ha'tov ve'et ha'mavet ve'et ha'rav asher anochi mitzavecha hayom le'ahava et Adonai Elohecha la'lechet bidrachav v'lishmor mitzvotav v'hukotav v'mishpatav v'chayita v'ravita uverachacha Adonai Elohecha ba'aretz asher tava shama l'rishta.
Higati lachem hayom ki avo tuvedu lo tarechu yamim al ha'adama asher ata over et hayardeh lavo shama l'rishta haidoti vachem hayom et hashemayim v'et haaretz Hakakim hamavet natati lefanecha habracha v'chachala uvacharta b'chaim l'ma'atihiyeh ata v'zorecha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet b'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Oh. Oops. Haftarah comes from Isaiah chapter 58, which can be found on page 17, the blessing beforehand on page 16.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratzav v'divreihem hane'emarim ba'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'invi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek.
Karav agaron al takshov Kashofar harem kolecha v'hageh la'ami pisham uvet Yaakov chatotam.
God says, cry with a full throat, do not hold back. Let your voice resound like a shofar. Declare to my people their transgression, and to the house of Jacob their sin. Yes, they seek me daily, as though eager to learn my ways, as if they were a people that does what is right, and has not forsaken the way of its God.
Because on your fast day you pursue your own affairs, while you oppress all your workers. Because your fasting leads only to strife and discord, while you strike with cruel fists. Such fasting on this day will not help you be heard on high.
Is this the fast I have chosen, a day of self-affliction, bowing your head like a reed and covering yourself with sackcloth and ashes? Is this what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Eternal? Is not this the fast I have chosen, to unlock the shackles of injustice, to loosen the ropes of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to tear every yoke apart? Surely it is to share your bread with the hungry and to bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked to cover them, never withdrawing yourself from your own kin.
If you remove lawlessness from your midst, the pointing finger, the malicious word, if you give yourself to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall shine in the darkness, and your night become bright as noon. The Eternal One will guide you always, filling your throat in parched lands and renewing your body's strength. You shall be like a garden overflowing with water, like a spring that never fails. Some of you shall rebuild the ancient ruins, rebuilding the foundations of ages past. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, restorer of the streets to dwell in.
Titanag al Adonai, v'chir kavticha al bomotei haaretz, v'ha'achalticha nachalat Yaakov avicha, ki pi Adonai diber.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol haolamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer v'oseh, hamdaber umkayem, shekol devarav, emet v'tzadek, al ha'torah v'al ha'avodah, v'al ha'nevi'im, v'al yom ha'kipparim hazeh, shenatat lanu Adonai Eloheinu, limchila v'lishlecha, Ulchapara lechavod ultiferet. Al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach. Varchim otach yitbarach shimcha b'fi kol chai. Tamid la'olam va'ed udvarcha emet v'kayam la'ad. Baruch atah Adonai melech mochel v'soleach la'avanotenu la'avanot amo beit Yisrael uma'avir ashmotenu. Bechol shana v'shana, melech al kol haaretz, nikadesh Yisrael, v'yom ha'kippurim.
Lashana Tova. My name is Lorena Blonsky, and I've been asked to give a prayer for the world. Dear God, our world is beautiful, its oceans, its rainforests, its mountains. Our world is broken, its tyranny, its poverty, its climate disasters. Our people are beautiful, from all lands, all cultures, and all faiths. Our people are broken from injustice, persecution, and suffering. As we pray on this Yom Kippur for our forgiveness and renewal, we pray for our world and for all people to be healed. We pray that all peoples of our earth see the need to clean our soil and our oceans, to stop war, to feed the hungry, and to let people live with dignity. May we strengthen our resolve to listen to each other, to try to understand each other, and to be curious and tolerant of our differences. May we understand that no one has the only answer, that there are many answers, and that we must come together and work together to repair ourselves and our world. We pray for peace in all our lands and in all our hearts.
Haremi b'koach kolecha, haremi el tireh. Raise your voice with power, raise it, have no fear. Nearly 5 months ago, I gave birth to a baby boy. These past few months have been a delirious, sleep-deprived roller coaster filled with many firsts. I have been waiting for these moments my entire life. I've wanted to become a mother for as long as I can remember. And now that I'm finally a mom, I can proudly say that mother is by far my favorite job yet. That's why this year's story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, struck me differently. Traditionally at Hakafah, we read about this story on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and not today on Yom Kippur. But in the reflective spirit of Yom Kippur, I'd like us to return to this important story. In the binding of Isaac, there is something, or rather, there is someone who is missing. You all know the story. God commands Abraham to bind his son Isaac on an altar on Mount Moriah and offer him as a sacrifice. This troublesome story is a test of Abraham's obedience and commitment to God. Once Isaac is bound on the altar, an angel of God stops Abraham just before the bloodshed occurs, instructing Abraham to sacrifice a ram in Isaac's place. But this year, my first reading of this story as a mother, I wonder, where was Sarah? The story seems to cry out for the mitigating presence of our first matriarch's voice. How would this story be different if Sarah had played a part? The rabbis in the Midrash noticed Sarah's conspicuous absence. They ask, when the text says, "And Abraham rose up early in the morning," why does it say early in the morning? The rabbis conclude that Abraham said to himself, maybe Sarah will not give me permission to sacrifice Isaac, so I will get up early while Sarah is still asleep so she doesn't see us. In this act of domestic secrecy, We see a manipulative, controlling Abraham who removes Sarah from the narrative entirely by making a life-altering decision for her instead of with her. Now that I'm a mother, this story is painful and terrifying. I would never allow Yaakov to take our son to sacrifice him on an altar, at least not without a long talk first, and if not that, an all-out brawl. We know the result of the silencing of Sarah's voice. In the Torah, the very next story following the binding of Isaac is Chaye Sarah, Sarah's life. But the story is hardly about Sarah's life. The next chapter begins, the life of Sarah came to 127 years, and Sarah died. Without Sarah's voice, there was silence. There was death. This year, I read the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, as a cautionary tale, teaching us that Abraham's dishonest stealth and manipulation is an example of what can happen when the voices of women are silenced and kept in the shadows. I, too, have felt like Sarah. In 2018, 3 months before Yaakov and I moved to Jerusalem for my first year of rabbinical school, we found out I was pregnant. I cried as I held up the positive pregnancy test, knowing that motherhood was everything I'd ever wanted, only not yet. Our decision, though painful, was immediate. We both wanted a baby, but we agreed that we were not prepared to guide a small soul through our world just yet. Within 24 hours, we found ourselves at a local abortion clinic where the most gentle, kind, supportive women in the world took care of us. I was treated with the utmost respect and privacy as they offered me the pill that would terminate my pregnancy. The abortion itself went quickly and smoothly, but there was an air of secrecy around it that disturbed and pained me. The abortion clinic was hidden with no windows, no exterior doors, and no identifying signs. After the abortion, I was never informed of support groups or spaces to discuss or process the complex emotions that followed my abortion. By growing up as a female identifying person in this complicated world, I had learned all too well that abortion was not a subject to speak about in public. So the next day, I called in sick to work. I had a cold, I had said, as I lay in bed with pain in my body and in my heart. I wanted to tell the world the truth. I didn't have a cold. I had an abortion. But how was I supposed to say that? At the time, I didn't know anyone who had had an abortion, or at least anyone who spoke about having one. I had never encountered any Jewish texts or Jewish spaces that discussed the topic of abortion. And in high school, if anyone ever uttered the word abortion, it was usually attached to the connotation that the girl was wild or promiscuous. Our society taught me without words that abortion was the most taboo topic, and undergoing one meant a permanent scarlet letter seared onto your reputation. My voice, my emotions, and my story were locked away in a vault that even I barely had the key to unlock. I was shut out in the dark, silenced, with our matriarch Sarah as my only companion. I wrestled in the dark with this secret for nearly 3 years, guilting myself with questions like, how could I be a rabbi when I'd had an abortion? In my mind, the two felt at odds with each other. It wasn't until I found myself in a rabbinical internship that presented me with Jewish texts on reproductive justice that I finally opened up to a colleague about my abortion. She supportively addressed my guilt. How could I be a rabbi when I'd had an abortion? My colleague replied, easy, you'll be a rabbi who had an abortion. So here I am, Hineni. I am an almost rabbi who has had an abortion, and I am no longer in the dark. Why should I be? 1 in 4 American women have abortions in their lifetimes. 1 in 4. That's more common than the 1 in 8 women who will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. More than the 1 in 5 people who wash their hands with soap after using the bathroom. Gross. Abortion isn't a new trend suddenly growing in modern times. Abortion has existed for thousands of years. In fact, in our own tradition, ancient Jewish midwives were revered not only for their expertise in facilitating labor and birth, but also for performing abortions. Abortions were and still are an integral part of our tradition's appreciation for reproductive health. The U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade forces women and others with uteruses back into the darkness of shame, silence, isolation, and danger. Trans and non-binary folk with female reproductive systems, people who are often left out of this conversation, are equally adversely affected by this ruling. It is an assault on all of these groups' lives, human rights, democracy, and religious freedom, and it is already having a damaging impact on our world. With the significant hurdles already confronting those seeking access to reproductive care in the United States, this decision not only exponentially increases those who are impacted, but hurts those who already face discriminatory obstacles to health care. Communities of color, women who are poor, people with disabilities, people in rural areas, the trans and non-binary community, the list goes on and on and on. Isn't this one of the failures of justice that we bemoan as part of our Yom Kippur liturgy? How do we as Jews respond to this? Has Jewish tradition thought about this issue? Of course it has. This issue has been with us for millennia because it raises fundamental questions about essential issues of life, death, and personhood. Consider the question of personhood. When does a human life begin, and how is it related to personhood? We can turn to our great 11th century sage Rashi. He commented on a case of abortion, explaining that de kol zman shelo yotze le'avir ha'olam lo nefesh. All the while that the fetus has not gone out into the world, it is not a soul. By our tradition's definition, a fetus is not a full person. It is not yet a person's life. The Supreme Court ruling, however, quotes again and again that the fetus should be referred to as an unborn person, a full person, just not yet born. This is an entirely different understanding of personhood than what our tradition dictates. So to whose definition do we turn? Rashi, the greatest Talmudic scholar in history, to the Supreme Court, or to my state legislator? I choose Rashi, but my choice doesn't seem to matter. As Abraham decided for Sarah, the state will decide for me what defines a person. There are many reasons abortion is a choice under Jewish law, for everything from easing mental anguish and financial hardship, to addressing the consequences of rape or infidelity, to a possible path when an irreparable fetal health issue is detected. But no matter the reason, explicitly written in the Mishnah we read, Chayei hakodmin l'chayav, if a woman's life is in danger, her life always takes precedence over the life of the fetus. Although there are differing interpretations of what it means for a woman's life to be in danger, all the interpretations agree. The woman's life comes first, up to the moment when the fetus begins to emerge. When the question is whether to give precedence to the life of the mother or the life of the fetus, abortion is not only permitted in Jewish law, it is mandated. And this ruling is the earliest rabbinic code formulated in the 2nd century. This is our religion, and this is our religion's primary and most declarative statement on the issue of abortion. State by state, pro-life activists have pushed for the most restrictive abortion laws they can enact. Rabbi David Kasher of Ikar in Los Angeles recently highlighted the words of one such activist. The activist's name is Matt Sand, and he is the legislative director of Pro-Life Wisconsin. Matt Sand said, "What we called for is a total ban of abortions. We don't think that abortions are ever necessary to save the life of a mother." So who do we follow? Whose voice do we heed? The Mishnah or Matt Sand of Wisconsin? But if I live in Wisconsin, then I have no choice. I have no recourse to the Mishnah, no recourse to my religion, no recourse to my own beliefs. I have to hand the power to control my own body to the state politicians. Many of our ancestors came to this country fleeing religious persecution. They understood that this country was founded by people who also had fled religious persecution. They understood that this country was founded upon the conviction that there must be immutable principles of a society with a mix of all kinds of people and all kinds of religions. One of those immutable principles is a necessary premise for such a society to embrace justice. Quote, "The government shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." Quote. Radical? I don't think so. That's the language that starts the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Make no mistake, our country is not just dismissing the right to an abortion, it is dismissing the right to religious freedom. The decision to overturn Roe v. Wade is not a one-movement issue. It is an attempt, among other things, to erode the religious freedom that is a foundational pillar of our country. And so I ask myself on this Yom Kippur, what will be the next chapter of our country's story of silencing the voice of Sarah? In a lesser-known midrashic insight, the sages say that the 100 blasts of the shofar that we hear on the high holidays symbolize a different cry. The 100 cries of our matriarch Sarah upon realizing that Abraham took her son to sacrifice. When we hear the shofar blasts, they are not to be heard merely as blasts of a horn to rouse or summon us. The shofar blasts are cries out to God. Today, the shofar teems with tears. And perhaps now more than ever, those 100 blasts feel like millions, the millions of Americans impacted by this. The Haftorah for Yom Kippur directs us to Kera begaron al tachshoch keshofar harem kolecha. Cry with a full throat. Do not hold back. Let your voice resound like a shofar. And that cry of the shofar charges us to hear and answer the cry of others. In the sobbing of the shofar, we hear the cries of women and all folks with female reproductive systems in our country whose bodies are no longer their own. We hear the cries of a 10-year-old rape victim who is forced to cross state lines to terminate her pregnancy and save her life. We hear the cries of a young woman in a Florida court who was blocked from obtaining an abortion because she was deemed, quote, not sufficiently mature enough to decide whether to terminate her pregnancy. We hear the cries of women of color, trans and non-binary folks with uteruses, and those who are impoverished who are reminded yet again that they are not valued or respected citizens. We hear the cries of our friends and neighbors, some of us in this very room, whose abortion stories may still be silenced. We hear the cries of Sarah and all those in this country who are forced into the shadows. So what do we do? Isaiah implores us to haremi bekoach kolecha, haremi el tirei. Raise your voice with power, raise it, have no fear. Rabbi Jill Jacobs, CEO of the rabbinical organization Trua, also instructs, remember that when Roe v. Wade came out, the right wing refused to accept their loss. They spent 50 years laser-focused on unlosing. We must do the same in order to protect lives and bodily autonomy. The road will be long, but we cannot give up or turn away. We must not turn away. We must mobilize our Jewish communities at the grassroots level, connecting synagogues and individuals to meaningful opportunities to support women seeking abortions in states where it is now banned. We must educate ourselves and others on issues of reproductive justice in relation to where our faith stands. We must become comfortable with our own abortion stories and share them with friends, families, and strangers so that we can step out of the shadows and advocate harder and louder. Isaiah got it right. Raise your voice with power. And most importantly, we must vote. Especially now, when 2 seats on the Illinois Supreme Court are up for grabs this November in the 2nd and 3rd judicial districts. That includes Lake and DuPage counties where some of us here may reside. Those Illinois Supreme Court seats hold the potential to protect or threaten the future of abortion access here in Illinois as early as 2023. Exercising the fundamental right to vote is the best expression of our values and of our voices. If we amplify the voice of Sarah, if we fight for the right of every person to make their own informed decisions about their bodies and future, if we fight for reproductive freedom, we will finally begin to hear the cries of the shofar, and we will not be written out of the story of our country. May we find Sarah, may we elevate her, and may we value her voice. L'chatima tova.
Services and learning continue throughout the day. We're scheduled for a learning session with Jonah Orlovsky in the Centennial Room at 12:15. I'm looking at Rona because 12:15? I'm just the rabbi. Is it 12:15? Someone? Is that what it said? 12:15? So between now and then, I'm going to be in there for a schmooze. So if anyone wants to come and join me in there beforehand, but if not, then Shana Tova, we'll see y'all later.
dein Stil. Ich bin geschlafen auf dein Deal. Ich hab kein Mal nicht gelebt mit Ersatz nur. Nur ich seh dein Schloss, ich seh dein Form. Ein Herz ist nicht kein mähliches Thron. Es ist ein kalte und ein kalte Halleluja. Und wie einmal, to sag mir euch, was tut sich dort in dein Scheuß, to wusch darfst dich schämen wie ein Psule.
Laba wekulyo kulungi wekusanyusa aboluganda okutula. Laba wekulyo kulungi wekusanyusa aboluganda okutula. Ine mato